Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The criminal trial involving Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber continues in Ottawa. We have the latest. The McDougall Creek wildfire in British Columbia has now claimed more than 200 properties in the province as the blaze continues to burn out of control. And BCN's Micah Quinn chats with the Southern Alberta man about his unique and massive classic car collection.
Your nation, your province, your Southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The criminal trial of Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Leach and Chris Barber continues in Ottawa. Today, the focus was whether or not Facebook content should have been entered into evidence. The two are co-accused of mischief and counseling others to commit mischief, along with obstructing police and intimidation. The duo brought a convoy of large trucks and other vehicles to our nation's capital last year, protesting against the federal government's COVID-19 restrictions. The Crown says getting the Freedom Convoy 2022 Facebook page accepted as evidence will help prove how the two conspired together. Leach's lawyer says the Crown is trying to put over 200 pages of Facebook evidence to the court, including posts that were not made by either Leach or Barber. The trial is expected to last around 2 weeks. Wildfires continue to rage on in many parts of British Columbia. The province is currently dealing with 412 active wildfires. Emergency officials in the Okanagan say 400 properties in West Kelowna, the West Bank First Nation, and the Central Okanagan Regional District remain on evacuation order. The wildfire area restriction remained in effect today. The district says violating it by entering the area by boat or forest access road could mean a fine of $1,150. The McDougall Creek wildfire has destroyed around 200 properties in the area and remains classified as out of control by the BC Wildfire Service. It is estimated to be around 135 square kilometers. Emergency officials in BC say residents from the Wilson's Landing area in the Okanagan can temporarily access the homes they had to evacuate due to a wildfire. Homeowners can check their properties and retrieve important items, but must follow safety guidelines, including keeping visits to immediate family members only. Residents are being asked to wear long-sleeve shirts, pants, closed-toed shoes, and face masks before entering. Canada's Emergency Preparedness Minister says Ottawa is studying options for a natural disaster response team or an agency to improve our country's ability to react when natural disasters strike. Harjit Sajan says it will incorporate Canada's unique geography and multiple types of events, including wildfires and floods.
So what we've been doing is analyzing the changes that have been taking place, and we've seen the frequency that, whether it's from floods or from wildfires, putting the right resources in. And now, because of the increased frequency of this, we need to make sure that the right resource, the right level is can provide the right support. So at the federal level, yes, we are looking at many different options right now. What it looks like, I don't have an answer for you yet. Minister Blair has done some amazing work on this, and I'll take the mantle and move things forward.
Democratic Institutions Minister Dominic LeBlanc is appointing Quebec Judge Marie-Josée Hoog to lead a public inquiry into foreign interference. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer says he supports the decision.
Government of Canada, with the support of all recognized parties in the House of Commons, will appoint the Honourable Marie-Josée Hoog, a judge of the Court of Appeal of Quebec, to lead a public inquiry established under the Inquiries Act. Justice Hoog will be tasked with examining and assessing interference by China, Russia, and other foreign states and non-state actors, including any potential impacts, to confirm the integrity of and impacts on the 2019 and 2021 general elections.
We completely rejected both the fake job and the person that they filled it with the last time. David Johnson was a family friend of the Trudeaus and strong links to the Trudeau Foundation. So with this nomination, we accept Justice Oak. That's what we're saying. We accept the nomination of Justice Oak, and we will continue to not just push for the government to be open and transparent and provide all the documents and waive all the cabinet confidences that may be required to ensure Canadians get their answer, but also to put pressure on the steps they could take today, bringing in a foreign agents registry, expelling officials from the regime in Beijing who have operated in diasporas across, in communities across the country to exert influence on our democracies, people who were involved with the Beijing-run police stations in communities across Canada.
The prime lending rate may be going up yet again. That's according to Tiff Macklem, the Bank of Canada governor. Macklem says even though the central bank kept its key lending rate steady at 5% this week, rates may have to go up to keep inflation in check once again. Inflation is currently sitting at 3.27%. It was 2.8% last month.
We remain concerned that inflationary pressures are persisting and larger than normal price increases remain broad-based across many of the goods and services Canadians buy regularly. Just as it took longer to see clearer evidence that higher interest rates were moderating demand in the economy, it may now be taking longer for this to translate into lower inflationary pressures. We know it takes time for interest rates to work their way through the economy and relieve price pressures. The other possibility, of course, is that monetary policy is not yet restrictive enough to restore price stability. And unfortunately, the longer we wait, the harder it is likely to be to reduce inflation.
Well, it was slightly cooler and rainy in some parts of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it may have been a little soggy today, but a bright and sunny weekend is shaping up.
Yeah, and it looks like the sun even peaked out a little bit this afternoon after that 60% chance of showers we saw today. Overnight low this evening, 5 degrees. We're going to see partly cloudy skies tonight. And as we get into Saturday, we're going to see a high of 21 degrees, mainly sunny skies, even a UV index of 5. So it'll be nice to get outside, get some vitamin D. And there will be lots of opportunity to do that over the next week as well, as we're going to be seeing some hot, sunny conditions coming our way. And I'll be back later in the show to let you know all about that.
Great, thanks so much, Jeanette. Police in Coronation, Alberta have charged a man in connection with a church burning. Police say they received a call about a structure fire at the Evangelical Free Church in the town of Coronation on Tuesday afternoon. Witnesses say a man was seen carrying a jerry can to the church just before 12 noon. Sadly, the church was completely destroyed. Fortunately, however, there were no reports of any injuries. 23-year-old Nicholas Guy Fortier of Coronation faces charges of arson and mischief over $5,000. He was released on bail and will appear in court on October the 13th. Now, according to a report by True North, 83 Canadian churches have been burned or vandalized over the past couple of years. A Lethbridge woman who's accused of setting fire to the Mayor McGrath Holiday Inn Hotel back in February has elected to be tried without a preliminary inquiry. Carissa Ricky Plume faces various charges, including arson causing damage to property and 3 charges of failing to comply with release conditions. Firefighters were called to a third-floor fire in the hotel to help contain the blaze earlier this year. One woman was taken to hospital. Police say the hotel sustained around $1 million in damage. Investigators found that the fire was caused by improper disposal of smoking materials. The case has been adjourned until October the 23rd. As students headed back to school across the province, the RCMP are sending out reminders and safety tips to look out for parents and drivers. Angela Stewart has more from the RCMP. Angela.
Yeah, Hal, school is back in session, and as students head back to class, there are some important things to keep in mind for both parents and drivers. Now, we chatted with RCMP Friday, and Sergeant Darren Turnbull with the traffic unit says a good place to start for parents is reminding kids about the use of crosswalks.
If they're walking to school or waiting for a school bus or riding the school bus, crossing the street, all of those things, remind them about the safety precautions to take when crossing the street, making sure that you're using the crosswalks or obeying the school patrollers that are excited to be back as well.
We are now in fall season, and that means winter is right around the corner. With that comes early mornings in the dark. RCMP recommends pedestrians wear reflective or light-colored clothing so you are visible for drivers.
It's easy as pedestrians to see the lights of a vehicle coming, but for the drivers of the vehicles, it's a lot harder for them to see the pedestrians. So please make sure that you're doing your best to be seen.
A reminder to drivers that school zone speed limits are in effect and to always look out for school buses picking up students. RCMP are reminding drivers to never pass a school bus when its red lights are flashing, as you could be faced with a $480 fine. Hal?
Well, thanks so much, Angela. There are now 128 confirmed cases of E. coli at daycare centres in Calgary. Alberta Health Services says 25 patients are receiving care in city hospitals, while 3 have been discharged. Officials say all of the patients are stable and receiving care at the Alberta Children's Hospital and at the Peter Lougheed Centre. AHS says there are also 3 people linked to daycares who are receiving care outside of Alberta. Cheryl Seaborn is a registered nurse. She was also the UCP Lethbridge West candidate who lost out to the NDP's Shannon Phillips in the last provincial election. Seaborn says Lethbridge needs more ways to attract physicians to our region to help address the severe doctor shortage.
Physicians are their own business. They make their own decisions about where they plan to live and to work. And that's based on lots of different things. What we do see is that physicians tend to, when they graduate medical school, they tend to go to areas where they have bigger centers. So, you know, those bigger urban hospitals that offer many different types of services. And so they tend to kind of gravitate towards those areas. And so the trick really is for places like us, you know, in Southern Alberta, is what are we going to do to make us that type of a center?
Catch the full interview with Cheryl Seaborn and myself coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta's official opposition says the Alberta government's moratorium on solar and wind farms risks diverting our renewable resources away from the province. NDP energy critic Kathleen Ganley says companies focused on green energy are now starting to question the Alberta government's commitment to renewables.
Starlight Energy was planning to submit multiple applications to the AUC in the next 3 months. They have projects around the world totaling $3.7 billion. They wrote that the 7-month ban, quote, has unfortunately led us to question whether our assumption that Alberta's business-friendly environment still holds true. And this may have negative consequences in our decision to increase the company's investment appetite for the province. McCain Foods is looking for a renewable power source for their Coaldale plant. They wrote that, quote, ultimately, such an abrupt stop to project applications is very detrimental to regulatory certainty.
Lethbridge College's Centre for Technology, Environment and Design has launched a new research initiative which includes a new wildlife analytics lab. It's the first of its kind in Canada. The new initiative focuses on cementum analysis of wildlife teeth. It's a technique which examines the hard tissue that covers the root of a tooth to help figure out the age, reproductive history, and migratory pattern of the wildlife species.
Inside of teeth, there's a thing called cementum, which you might guess holds teeth in place, cement, and in it there's annuli. Just like in a tree where we have growth rings, the same principles apply. Unfortunately, with a tree, you can just cut it and look at the rings. In a tooth, you need to go through quite elaborate chemical process to get at these annuli that are sort of embedded within the teeth's roots. So our lab has all the equipment, brand new equipment, to run through that analysis process and provide age estimates back to anyone who's interested. Who's interested can range from a hunter or a naturalist who's found a dead animal or killed an animal for hunting purposes and wants to know how old it is. But on the larger scale, agencies, researchers are often interested in knowing how old animals are for management and research purposes.
More than $145,000 was provided in establishing the lab by the Alberta Professional Outfitter Society.
We have for some time been interested in, and we do send and submit teeth already down to the States, but we were interested in a made in Alberta solution and save us time and money and whatnot. So we got in communications with the college and they were willing and able to pursue the activity or pursue the lab. And so we started exploring the costs and what they needed for equipment.
Interesting stuff. More information on the lab can be found on the college's website. Rob Stanko is a classic car collector. He is such an enthusiast that he even has a garage in Lethbridge full of them, including many classic Mopars. Video journalist Micah Quinn caught up with Stanko to check out his vast collection.
Rob Stanko has amassed a large collection of 18 classic cars. He told us he developed a passion for the vintage vehicles at an early age.
We lived on the farm east of town here, and I remember going down Machinery Row and jumping in an old Model T that my dad had, and there was an apple box there behind the steering wheel. And I remember playing with that and coming home and my hands were just black from the steering wheel, and that probably got me involved with a little bit of an interest in cars.
According to Stanko, there are 2 cars in his collection that he would consider his favorite.
When I turned 65, I treated myself to a birthday present, 1970 Cuda, 4-speed, 440, 6-barrel. All numbers matching car, and it's even got electric windows in it. Muscle cars weren't known to have electric windows, but it's my pride and joy. But I've also got a couple of hot rods. I've got a 32 Ford just behind me here, and it's sort of a neat car to drive. It's a different feel to the car when you drive it, and it makes you feel like you're in that show American Graffiti, and you're going to go meet the guys. I have a weakness for the muscle cars, but the cars that are 80, 90 years old should be preserved too. In museums, you know, the original ones, just to show where we've come from.
Stanko says even though he collects classic cars, he's not much of a handyman when it comes to working on them.
I'm not good at mechanics, so don't give me a wrench.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A beautiful Cuda. Like my dad used to say, it's Mopar or no car. Streets Alive is a local Christian charity which helps the homeless and those who are battling addictions here in our city. Earlier this year, Lethbridge City Council voted against providing the group with funding that would have come from the federal government. Ken Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive, says the money eventually did come through, however.
We were still awarded that contract, but the council's decision was kind of misplaced, and so that contract now is being fully funded by the city instead of having part of it funded by federal funding. So the gap, there was a couple of month gap to the services to the people, but we did that with our own funding. So that we're just here for the people. But yes, we are currently under contract with the city for doing encampment outreach services till the end of this year.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with Ken Kissick of Streets Alive and BCN's Naveen Day coming up later in our broadcast. The actor from the TV series That 70s Show, Danny Masterson, received 30 years to life in prison for raping 2 women around 20 years ago. The court heard that Masterson drugged the 2 women on separate occasions at his home in Hollywood Hills. There were also allegations that the Church of Scientology tried to intimidate the 2 women to not go to police, which it denies. Masterson is a well-known Scientologist who will not be eligible for parole until he's in his early 70s.
Obviously, we are very disappointed in the sentence the judge handed down today. However, for the past several months, a team of the top appellate lawyers in the country has been reviewing the transcripts of the trial. They have identified a number of significant evidentiary and constitutional issues, which they will address in briefs to both the state and federal courts.
Yeah, so a judge sentenced Danny Masterson to 30 years to life in prison. That means he'll spend at least 25 years in prison before he's even eligible for parole. He had no real reaction to the sentencing. He just sort of looked ahead stoically. His family, including his wife, actor Bijou Phillips, was sitting behind him, and they seemed to have not much reaction either. The 2 victims both spoke in court. They stood up and read statements, very dramatic in both of their cases. One of them spoke about all the trauma that she's had to live with, and that Masterson will have to sit with that now that she's sort of shifted onto him, the shame that she has felt. The other spoke mostly about the Church of Scientology that she and Masterson were both born into, and how she lost her family and friends through reporting this, but doesn't regret any of it.
Wow. Well, we saw lots of clouds and some much-needed moisture in parts of southwestern Alberta today, but that rain, however, may be short-lived. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. Well, it's nice to enjoy a little bit of that liquid sunshine today in Lethbridge. We definitely needed the moisture. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears, however, that the rain clouds may be leaving us again fairly soon.
Yeah, you bet. And it looks like they parted this afternoon too, leaving us with beautiful sunny skies for the rest of the week. So look at this, high of 21 degrees Saturday, Sunday 23. And then as we get back into the work week next week, look what we're faced with there. High of 27 on Monday, 27 on Tuesday, 24 on Wednesday, and a high of 28 degrees on a Thursday. That's more like summer vacation weather if you ask me. So average high for this time of year, 21, average low 6 degrees, 33 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1981, and in 1943 we were sitting at a chilly -3. 6:57, that is when the sun rose this morning. Sun going to bed this evening at 8 o'clock, right on the nose there. So we're now looking at 13 hours and 3 minutes of daylight. Mainly sunny conditions on the west coast tomorrow. High of 21 in Victoria, 17 near the water, 21 also in Vancouver, but 27 further inland you go. Also a humidex of 30 as you get further inland. 23 for a high in Edmonton, mainly sunny conditions, foggy patches in the morning there. 21 for a high in Calgary, lots of sunshine. The rest of the prairies also fairly nice and clear with a little bit of fog patches here and there. Saskatoon, high of 21, 22 for a high in Regina, and 22 also in Winnipeg with partly cloudy skies. They're seeing some fog in the morning there as well. Okay, Toronto looking at a high of 24 with partly cloudy skies, 23 for an expected high in Ottawa tomorrow, and Montreal seeing a high of 21 with partly cloudy skies tomorrow. Okay, so Fredericton still under that excessive heat warning. They are seeing those hot, humid conditions persisting tonight and into Saturday. 27 for a high, could see a chance of showers as well as a risk of a thunderstorm. Halifax looking at a high of 28 degrees, mainly sunny skies. Charlottetown, 26 for a high, looking at a risk of thunder showers. Also a chance of rain there, 22 for a high in St. John's, and with partly cloudy skies there. So there you have it. That's your forecast.
Stats Canada says the economy added 40,000 jobs last month. Most of the gains came in the professional, scientific, technical services, and construction areas. The jobless rate held steady at 5.5%. Even though the Bank of Canada kept its prime lending rate at 5%, it wants more confirmation that growth is stalling, including the labor market, to help keep inflation in check. Inflation currently sits at 3.27%. Enbridge has closed a $4.6 billion offering of shares, the company announced, as part of its deal to purchase 3 American gas utilities. The company says it issued more than 100 million shares under the plan at $44.70 US per share. The Calgary-based company signed a deal to buy the companies from Virginia-based Dominion Energy earlier this week. It agreed to pay $9.4 billion in cash and assume around $4.6 billion in debt. Via Rail is returning its service to pre-pandemic levels. Starting in late October, the Crown Corporation says it is bringing back 2 round trips between Toronto and Ottawa and a round trip between London and Toronto. The ramp-up comes 3.5 years after the COVID-19 pandemic brought some rail operations to a screeching halt. Via suspended its cross-Canada routes and temporarily laid off more than 1,000 workers at the outbreak of the pandemic. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 57 points on the day to finish at 20,074. The Dow was up 75 points to 34,576. The S&P 500 was up 6 on the day to 4457, and the Nasdaq was up 12 points to 13,761. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 33 cents to 87.20 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 4 cents to 2.62 US. Gold was down 60 cents on the day to finish at 19.08 US an ounce, and silver was down 4 cents to 22.93 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.12 per bushel, barley's at $7.51, canola's at $17.58, and corn is at $9.22 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was down 43 cents to 183.23. Feeder cattle were down 23 cents to 255.35. And lean hogs October contract was down $1.30 to 81.53. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.31 US. Recapping one of our top stories, wildfires continue to rage on in many parts of British Columbia. The province is currently dealing with 412 active wildfires. Emergency officials in the Okanagan say 400 properties in West Kelowna, the West Bank First Nation, and the Central Okanagan Regional District remain on evacuation order. The wildfire restriction remained in effect today. The McDougall Creek wildfire has destroyed around 200 properties in the area and remains classified as out of control by the BC Wildfire Service. It is estimated at around 135 square kilometers. There is a Christian organization in Lethbridge which helps to feed and clothe many of our homeless here in the city. Coming up, we shall hear from the co-founder of Streets Alive, Ken Kissick, to discover how his group is having a big impact in so many lives here in our community. Watch the interview with BCN's Naveen Day shortly. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, be sure to visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
You know, here in Lethbridge and in cities right across Canada, a short drive through any downtown area will open your eyes to the challenges with addictions and homelessness. Thankfully, we do have some dedicated people and organizations who are committed to providing help. And joining us to talk about some of these challenges is one of them. He's Ken Kissick, and he is the co-founder of Streets Alive Mission right here in Lethbridge. Ken, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Ken, now many of our viewers already know what Streets Alive Mission is about. We've had you on our show before, but some probably don't. So for those who don't know about Streets Alive Mission, can you just give us a snapshot of what you do in Lethbridge?
Well, quickly, we kind of have two primary areas of focus. One is the street population. We provide mission services, clothing, respite. We do outreach services under contract with the city, helping with encampments. We're there for that population, bringing the love of God, bringing hope. The other area of focus is our recovery programs for men and women. We have up to 60 people inside of 4 stages of that recovery program, and we're very successful at that. So that's a very quick, broad view, but ultimately we are here to bring God's love and the gospel of Christ.
That's excellent to hear. Now, what can you tell us about the recent decision to purchase the Galt Manor building in downtown Lethbridge? This is a building known for being trashed by drug dealers and users. So just tell us, what are your plans for the building?
Well, so the Galt Manor purchase is actually part of a larger initiative called Coming Home. And the Galt Manor was completely renovated. And so when we acquired it, it's in excellent living condition. But Coming Home is an initiative for us to acquire over the next little while 3 or 4 buildings so that we can get away from being a lessee and actually own the properties that we provide the majority of our programs. The program started with our women's house, which we owned and built and renovated a couple of years ago. Galt Manor is just part of that. We are currently in the process of closing a deal to acquire land and building to be able to move our mission out of the downtown. That won't happen for 12 or 15 months. And we are closing on another place where we're going to have 32 beds of men's recovery housing. So it's all together in that. That's all part and parcel. Galt Manor will be used as stage 4 housing. We have begun to transition from the current people that are in there to our people. It's probably going to take about 12 months to get that whole thing done. But that's the reason for Galt.
So tell us, give us a little bit of a status update then on Galt Manor. Have you already gotten people moving in, or do you expect that it'll be at full capacity by year's end?
Well, we took it over full, and so it's as people leave, we put others in. So I'm more like probably this time next year till we get it completely rolled over. It just takes time.
Now, these kinds of things obviously take a lot of money to keep going. Now, earlier this year, City Council voted against providing Streets Alive with funding that would have come from the federal government. Any thoughts on what impact that has on the homeless population and your ability to help?
So, probably people a lot don't know this. We were still awarded that contract.
Oh.
But the council's decision was kind of misplaced. And so that contract now is being fully funded by the city instead of having part of it funded by federal funding. So the gap, there was a couple of month gap to the services to the people, but we did that with our own funding. So that we're just here for the people. But yes, we are currently under contract with the city for doing encampment outreach services till the end of this year. So that request wasn't for the contract, it was simply where the money was going to come from.
Now, you and your team are on the front lines in Lethbridge. Can you just share a bit about what you're observing this year with the encampment challenges? That's really a hot button issue here in Lethbridge. Just tell us what's been happening and what kinds of things do you think would be helpful to bring some improvement to that situation?
Well, all right. So the encampment strategy set out by the city, which was to not allow encampments to entrench themselves, is working. So people will notice there aren't any of the big encampments anymore. There's a move to quickly get in and kind of get them tore down, but the people are still here. So they've just spread out through the city into the coulees, and part of our outreach challenge is that we're supposed to provide housing referrals for those who want to go into housing. Over the last 2 months, we've provided 31 housing referrals, but there's no housing for them. So nobody's getting back to us because there is no place to place these people. So we are still stuck with people on the street being unhoused because there is no housing for them beyond the street and the shelter.
Well, that's sad to hear, but let's make things a little bit more positive for a second here. Let's hear some success stories. Are there any individuals who are overcoming addictions and rising up out of poverty?
So inside our recovery program and with the other programs that are running in the community, there are people who are making the choice to get off of drugs, to get out of that cycle. Within our recovery programs for men and women, if we can get them into the program, and our success rate is about 80%, okay, for people that get in. If we can keep them past 30 days on the trail to 120 days, our success rate goes to 92%. So it's very successful. The programs that we run, they're intense. And that's getting people to 120 days. Now, beyond that, over the last 3 or 4 years, we now have individuals who are 3 and 4 years clean. We have people who are getting their children back. So it's not just about getting people off of drugs and alcohol. It's getting them, restoring families. It's getting them back to work. And so we're successful. And those things are happening. The unfortunate part of all of this is that within Lethbridge, the opioid death rate is ridiculously high.
Now, you're talking about keeping these individuals in programs for longer than 30 days, which helps your success rate. What are some of the challenges with keeping people in these programs?
A lot of it is their willingness to do the work, their willingness to not respond in their old ways, but try and respond to the trauma in their life in different ways. And again, nobody got up one morning and said, I think I'll become an addict. They became addicted because of some kind of trauma. And so we are working with them to try and help deal with that trauma. Trauma requires healing, and for us, there is only one healer. And so that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do, is get them to engage with Christ at some point, and most do. And then that's where the success kind of rolls out.
Well, that perfectly segues into my next question, because I wanted to ask you, to what degree does faith in Jesus impact individuals in their recovery journey?
Everyone that we have who has gone on, the guys who are getting their kids back, the women, those people have all engaged in Christ. Some have had to re-engage. They were people. Others just have come to Christ. But he is absolutely key. Our faith of the staff, that keeps us here. But the reality is people need Christ. He is the healer. and doesn't have a magic wand. They still have to do the work, and we all do. But faith is key to success.
And those individuals coming out of these recovery programs, are they attributing their success like from Christ?
Yeah, most will. As a matter of fact, we just heard a story the other day of one of the women who was in our program. She was pretty challenging. She is Indigenous and had pretty horrific life. But she succeeded in getting through the program. She's gone back to school, and we heard the other day that she is leading other people to Christ.
Wow.
As you know, sharing her story and the success that we have, it just, it's the testimony that's there. And so, and we've got others that are doing that. And really, it's just God at work.
And how can people support Streets Alive? Do you need any volunteers, or how can people make donations?
So if you want, they just need to go to the website, www.streetsalive.ca. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter or X, I guess now. And there's a donate button right there. If they want to volunteer, they just need to go to the volunteer section. There's an application they can fill out, and they can come on in. We're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for people like to donate. And we'll take all the help we can get.
And on the subject of donating, because fundraising is such an ongoing thing with ministry needs, can you tell viewers a bit about the upcoming Ride for Refuge event on September 23rd, and how can people get involved?
So Ride for Refuge is really the partner of the coldest night of the year. It's the same organization. And so they just need to go to their computer, type in Ride for Refuge, and then look for location. We're there under Lethbridge, and they can sign up there. Everything's online. You can sign up as a team. There's 10K and 20K bike rides. You can also walk 5K, and it's all around Henderson Lake. So it's safe. It's family friendly. And there'll be marshals and everybody there. So if you like to cycle, this is a great way to come out and raise some money. If you just want to go for a nice calm walk and help us raise some money, you can do that too. But Ride for Refuge, just Google it, it'll come up. Look for Lethbridge and Streets Alive and sign up.
And then Ride for Refuge is a fundraiser for the Exodus Men's Life Recovery Program and also the Genesis Women's Life Recovery Program. Can you just explain what happens there and the impact that it's having?
Well, again, these are our recovery programs. Those are the places where people who are choosing to get out of the addicted lifestyle, they've begun a treatment process. And so now we walk them through that. 30, 120 days, then, another 120 days, they can stay as long as we walk. And again, our success rate past 30 days is 92% of the people walk free from addiction, get their life back. Okay. And again, almost all of them have a life with Christ involved in their life now too. So it's a win-win-win.
And then some of these people that have gone through the programs, are they now also volunteering? And when we show up to these events, will we get to meet some of these people?
Yes, most of our people in our program will be part of the volunteer corps at Ride for Refuge. So the problem is you won't really know them. Are separate from just volunteers. But yeah, they come out, they help. Part of the program is to volunteer, so it's good. So yeah, you can meet some and just talk to the organizers and they'll introduce you.
Well, that sounds really amazing. That Ride for Refuge event sounds like an awesome thing to do. Not only just good for the Streets Alive mission, but also great for the health. Go out, get some fresh air, get some exercise.
It's it's a win-win. And so far, we think the weather is going to be pretty decent for it. So should be a fun day.
Excellent. Well, Ken, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And we appreciate all that Bridge City does. Thank you.
The last Alberta provincial election saw a number of surprises, including certain cabinet ministers who were not re-elected, including Tyler Shandro, Josephine Pon, and Jason Copping. Danielle Smith and her party ended up getting a majority government, but it wasn't by a landslide like we saw back in 2019. Cheryl Seaborn ran for the UCP in Lethbridge West, and she lost to the incumbent, the NDP Shanna Phillips, by around 2,500 votes. Cheryl is a married mom, 5 kids, 6 grandkids, as a nurse, business owner, and has called Lethbridge home for about 25 years. As Cheryl joins us now from Lethbridge. Cheryl, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
Cheryl, let's talk about the whole experience of running to become an MLA here in Lethbridge. Now, you came in only 7 weeks before the election when Tory Tanner stepped aside as the UCP candidate. That must have been challenging for you, so close to the election.
Yes, it definitely presents challenges. Of course, getting out there and getting to know people is probably the biggest challenge that I had. And so that's really the biggest challenge, is to be able to get out and get to know people as quickly as you want to.
Yeah, people get to know you at the same time, like who is Cheryl Seaborn, what is she all about, where does she stand on a number of issues, and how will she best represent me at the legislature? So Cheryl, looking back, what do you think you really learned during your campaign, you and your team?
Well, I learned that the people of Lethbridge are pretty awesome. That's one thing that really stood out to me as I door knocked, as I met with people, as I met with groups of people that requested visits with us, or as I was able to go to businesses and meet with business people and employees there. I learned about how invested people are in our community. I learned about how people are passionate about the things that are happening, the things that affect them and impact them, and the concerns that they had. And overall, just that we really do have a wonderful community of wonderful people, and who are really interested in having what's best for the community, for Alberta. And so that was a pleasure, actually. And in fact, I would say many people have asked me about my experience, even with the loss. And honestly, I can't say anything other than it was really an awesome experience. Even though the end result wasn't what I'd hoped for, it was an awesome experience.
But looking back, let's talk about maybe things you and your team would have done a little differently through this journey.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I think I would want to do, even if I had a little bit longer time, is to bring more people together. I think that knocking on doors is great. You miss a lot of people when you knock on doors, though. I mean, we knocked on over 20,000 doors. Like, we actually, in a very short amount of time, I had a wonderful team of young people. We had a lot of great success in that way, and we're successful in many ways, but you don't get to meet everybody. And I think that bringing people together and hearing their views in town hall type of things, I think would have been very advantageous, actually. It gives you an opportunity to visit with people and get them to know you, which is really what's important, is for people to get to know me and to know what I stand for and how I would represent them, and really get a sense of that, like a feel of that. Sending out literature is great. Billboards are great. It shows people who you are by how you look, but it doesn't really tell people who you are and what you represent personally. And then also the opportunity then to have people ask you questions, right? Ask you questions and find out more information. And that's a two-way thing. You get to see where people stand on issues. You also get the opportunity to help people to get to know you better. And so I think actually that's something I would have done differently. I would have brought groups together and had more. I think that would have had more of an impact. That's very retrospective, right? Always 20/20 vision. But when you have such a short period of time, that would have been very beneficial to do something like that.
What were some of the biggest issues you heard while door knocking? I guess maybe the doctor shortage came up right to the surface?
Yeah, for sure. Healthcare in general came to the surface. There was a lot of misinformation, as we're all aware of, that was coming out during that campaign period. And so trying to allay some fears that people had about healthcare, specific to Lethbridge, of course, physician shortages is a big thing. Without question, that was a big thing for people, for constituents. And then, of course, that follows in line. We went to the Canada Pension Plan. We went to cost of living. people were very concerned about, cost of rent. The seniors particularly very concerned about their cost of living, cost of rent, those types of issues as well.
So Cheryl, as a registered nurse, what are your thoughts about the doctor shortage here in our region? There are still tens of thousands of people here in Lethbridge without a family physician.
Yeah, it is such a challenging and really complex issue. And I don't say that to make light of it or to try to brush it aside. It is a complex issue. Physicians are their own business. They make their own decisions about where they plan to live and to work. And that's based on lots of different things. What we do see is that physicians tend to, when they graduate medical school, they tend to go to areas where they have bigger centers. So, those bigger urban hospitals that offer many different types of services. And so they tend to kind of gravitate towards those areas. And so the trick really is for places like us, in Southern Alberta, is what are we going to do to make us that type of a center? I think the United Conservative Party is has been prior to the election and continues to make strides in that way and trying to make Chinook Hospital an area where we are offering more services by having, the increase in our cardiac services that we're anticipating coming. We're looking at trying to work with the University of Calgary Medical School to have our own medical school down here in Lethbridge. We certainly have the population in the South Zone to be able to accommodate something like that. We need the political will and we need the university to support something like that. And it would be a huge move for them to do so. And a huge, that's a long-term plan, right? To get doctors is a long-term plan, but we have to have a short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan in order to do something like that.
And it's not just the doctors, but let's talk about some of the specialists, the needs here as well, like obstetricians, cardiologists. We need so many more people coming to our region here to help us out.
Absolutely. So certainly having a cath lab will help cardiologists to come this way. And you have to start somewhere, right? You start with that and then you build on that kind of a service. And then you look at other specialties that are associated with the cardiac area. And then you can build on that to trauma and you can build in those ways. So you have to start one place at a time and focus on one place at a time. Obstetricians, again, that's a complex situation. We have to do things to be able to encourage physicians to want to come to this area. We certainly have lots of babies born in this area, but besides babies, we have lots of needs. The women in this area have lots of other gynecological needs that need to be met. And currently, we have lots of physicians that are stepping up and doing the best that they can, but it really is not sufficient. There's no denying that. And we need to find ways to bring those obstetricians and attract them to areas like Lethbridge.
You're obviously still in contact with a lot of people within the party itself, within the UCP. Where do we stand right now? What are your thoughts regarding decentralizing EMS and improving ambulance response times? That was also a big election issue.
It was a big election issue. Improving EMS response times has actually been something that we've seen measurable. So the data supports that we are improving those times. Those were issues particularly in the urban centers. So like Lethbridge, for sure, Calgary, for sure, Edmonton, those were just huge issues there. And there's no question that we're seeing that has improved, and that's been a very measurable improvement. And that overall, it increases patient safety, right? That's a patient safety issue. And in healthcare, sometimes we get tied up a little bit in how much does that cost? Or what does that process look like? And we have to remember the humanness in healthcare. And that's something that really I very much advocate for, is at the end of the day, what is the best thing for the person that needs that care? Are we doing the best thing for that person? And I think that EMS piece has really focused on that, and that's been a great thing. Certainly, I work in rural AHS medicine, and we've seen very much an increase in support. Our EMS are wonderful in the rurals, and they work very well together as a team with the various rural sites. And so that's an area that has already been working very well and continues to improve over time.
Cheryl, what are your thoughts on the Marda Loop Health Clinic in Southwest Calgary that was going to be charging $2,000 per individual, like a membership fee, to be able to get access to a doctor a lot faster, and maybe $4,000 per family? People were simply outraged by that, and they since pulled back since the province kind of pushed them on it and said, well, we're going to audit you guys here. But what are your thoughts on that? Health clinics doing stuff like that?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's not acceptable from the Canada Health Act. We aren't able to charge people to receive any type of care that you can get through our public health, right? Like any kind of service that we can that is accessible through public health, we can't charge for, so people can have really what would amount to an increased ability to get that help over someone else. And so it really was an inappropriate thing. I think that Premier Smith spoke very quickly to that and said it's unacceptable and it can't be done. And that was the appropriate thing to do. We can't see that happening at this time at all. Yeah, it's just an inappropriate method of trying to get people in to see physicians faster, or in a way that makes them seem able to access above and beyond the rest of us who maybe can't afford that kind of money to access healthcare. So
how important is it for people to actively engage in local politics to really influence healthcare policies and decisions?
You know, it's important in order to be involved in everything, I would suggest, not just healthcare. People need to become far more involved, get to know who's representing them, like deeply get to know, is this person actually representing me? What are their values? Do they align with the things that I believe in? Do they align with what needs to happen in the province? And then reach out to them regularly. You know, I hear people that say, you know, I've reached out to my MLA, they're not responding. Don't stop.
So Cheryl, how can local politicians collaborate with healthcare experts to address a lot of the community-specific healthcare challenges?
Yeah, so I think that we're going to have to, you know, some of that has been happening. It happened with Minister Copping when he was the health minister about a year ago. He started doing healthcare tours and actually reaching out to healthcare professionals and asking them, you know, what we thought was the most important criteria, how we can engage more with what's going on locally and on the local level. And I think that that's a really great start. I think that that MLAs have a part to play in that, in reaching out to people, but really the health minister needs to be actively engaged throughout the province to see what are healthcare professionals saying that are actually seeing what's going on in the front line, and then addressing those concerns appropriately.
And what strategies can MLAs really employ to ensure healthcare accessibility for marginalized or underserved populations? Cheryl, what do you think?
Yeah, and so, you know, that's a really critical issue, and it's a critical issue particularly for Lethbridge. We have many of those people, our homeless population, people with mental health and addictions that really do not receive likely adequate or any healthcare in some circumstances. And that, again, is a very complex question. It's not one that has a one answer. But MLAs need to be actively engaged, probably with not just provincially, but with what's going on in communities. So the municipality needs to be involved in that as well. So we need to be reaching out to our mayors to find out what's going on the ground in their view. Certainly in Lethbridge, we do have, you know, we make efforts with mobile sites to be able to offer healthcare. We have Indigenous liaisons and Indigenous wellness core built within Alberta Health Services to help with that portion of the population who also seem to not get appropriate health care all the time for themselves. And we need to be able to connect that a little bit better. Yeah, there's lots of complications in different areas, but a lot of it just comes through collaboration and discussion and trying to understand what's going on with leadership and what's going on the ground.
So Cheryl, what steps can constituents really take to hold their elected representatives accountable for their promises and actions related to healthcare?
Yeah, so constituents need to be in touch with their MLAs on a consistent basis. So, you know, the United Conservative Party has made promises in regards to healthcare. Healthcare needs to remain public. They are sticking with that. They said that before the election. They continue to reinforce that after the election, that public healthcare remains public healthcare. You know, and I think Marda Loop is a great example of that. That Premier came out and said, no, it's still public healthcare. You can't be doing things like that. However, when it comes to other promises in healthcare related to ensuring that we're meeting the needs through family physicians, through getting more nurses, through getting more, you know, occupational physiotherapists and all of those pieces. I think that first of all, constituents need to be educated about what exactly is healthcare. What exactly are we entitled to in our healthcare system, and make sure that they are talking to their MLAs on a very regular basis. You know, the more MLAs hear from the grassroots of the province, the more they realize this is an issue and we need to be dealing with this issue. If the majority of people are silent, then it sends a message saying, oh, this isn't really an issue that the majority of Albertans are really that concerned about. So as Albertans, we need to be very vocal and go to our MLAs and tell them exactly what's on our minds so that they realize these are the things that are important to my constituents. And I need to take these back to the health minister and to the premier and let them know. And if they're hearing that throughout the province, that's a direction, that is a directive that we're giving to the province and to the premier, saying this is important to us and we need to address it.
So Cheryl, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I have to ask you quickly: are you going to seek the nomination for the UCP for Lethbridge West for the next election?
You know, I've got a lot of Cheryl Seaborn signs in my garage right now.
Have to recycle. There you go. Do your part for the environment. Cheryl Seaborn was the UCP Lethbridge West candidate in the last provincial election. She's an RN, business owner, and has called Lethbridge home for the past 25 years. Cheryl, thanks so much for joining us today from Lethbridge.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. I really appreciate being here. It's actually my honor to be here. Thank you.
You bet. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.